Welcome to a deep dive into the lean startup. You sent over some really interesting excerpts from Eric Ries' book, and I'm very excited to unpack some of these core ideas
Yeah.
with you today.
Looking forward to it.
So it's interesting because so many people think of startups as these
Yeah.
overnight successes, driven by those almost mythical visionary entrepreneurs.
Yeah, it's a very seductive narrative, isn't it? But as Rees points out,
Yeah.
that myth can actually hold us back.
Over Lily.
It makes success seem like this magical combination of luck timing
Yeah.
and maybe some innate genius.
Right.
But that's not actually really helpful if you're trying to build something new.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Because it's almost like saying, well, I wasn't born with the entrepreneur gene,
Yeah.
so I guess I'm out of luck.
Right.
But Rees throws that whole idea right out the window.
Yeah.
And he argues that startup success is less about some mystical vision and more about a structured process that anyone can learn.
He even calls entrepreneurship a kind of management, which, may sound kind of boring at first.
Yeah.
But it's actually incredibly empowering.
Okay.
Because it means that there's a system, a framework that you can use to navigate the uncertainty of starting something new.
So no more just relying on gut feelings and hoping for the best.
Well, intuition definitely has its place.
Yeah.
But the lean startup method is about balancing that with a much more data-driven approach.
Okay.
It's about constantly testing your assumptions, learning from your mistakes,
Yeah.
and adapting your strategy as you go.
So let's unpack this framework a little bit.
Yeah.
In your excerpts, you highlighted 5 core principles of the lean startup.
Yeah.
Entrepreneurs are everywhere. Entrepreneurship is management-validated learning, build, measure, learn,
Yep.
and innovation accounting.
Those are the 5.
There's a lot to dig into here.
Yeah, where should we start?
But I think maybe that first principle, entrepreneurs are everywhere,
Okay.
is a great place to begin because it challenges the idea that you need a garage and a hoodie to be an entrepreneur.
Right. It's about anyone creating something new under conditions of uncertainty. So that could be, a scrappy startup, a team within a massive corporation,
Right.
even someone working on a side project in their spare time.
So you're saying it's more of a mindset than a specific job title.
Exactly. And that leads perfectly into that second principle.
Okay.
Entrepreneurship is management. It's about recognizing that even the most groundbreaking ventures
Right.
need structure and a system for navigating the chaos of the unknown.
Okay. I'm starting to see how these principles build on each other.
Yeah.
But what about validated learning? That one really stood out to me
Okay.
in the excerpts you shared.
Yeah. Validated learning is all about testing your assumptions, gathering data, and adapting based on what you learn.
Okay.
It's really the foundation of the entire lean startup methodology. You have a hypothesis about your business, but instead of just assuming you're right,
Right.
you design experiments to test it. You get out of the building, you talk to potential customers and see if your assumptions actually hold up.
Okay. That makes sense, but it also sounds a bit daunting.
Yeah.
Where do you even begin?
Well, Rees introduces this idea of leap of faith assumptions.
Okay.
These are the core beliefs about your business that could make or break you.
Right.
So these are the riskiest elements that need to be tested first.
Got it.
He uses the example of Facebook's early growth.
Okay.
What initially impressed investors wasn't necessarily the size of Facebook's user base,
Right.
but rather 2 key metrics.
Okay.
The amount of time active users spent on the site
Uh-huh.
and the staggering rate at which it spread across college campuses.
So they weren't just looking at vanity metric like the total number of users.
Right.
They were digging deeper
Exactly.
to understand what was really driving engagement and growth.
And those metrics validated 2 fundamental assumptions.
Okay.
1, that people actually found the product valuable, and 2, that it had a built-in growth mechanism.
Wow.
This early validation was critical to securing funding and fueling Facebook's meteoric rise.
Wow. Okay, so I'm starting to see the power
Yeah.
of testing these core assumptions early on.
Yeah.
But how do you actually pinpoint these make or break beliefs?
Yeah.
Because everyone thinks their idea is brilliant, right?
That's where things get really interesting.
Okay.
Ries emphasizes the importance of stepping outside of our own heads
Right.
and engaging directly with potential customers. He even uses this phrase, Genshi Jembutsu, which he borrowed from Toyota,
I love a good Japanese phrase.
It translates to go and see for yourself.
Okay.
It emphasizes firsthand observation,
Yeah.
not just relying on reports or secondhand information.
So it's about getting out of the building and actually talking to your potential customers.
Precisely. Ries shares this fantastic example
Okay.
of Toyota's chief engineer, Yuji Yokoya, taking a 53,000-mile road trip across North America
Wow.
to understand what customers really wanted in a minivan.
Wow. Talk about dedication.
Right. He wasn't just reading market research reports.
Right.
He was living the customer experience.
He was really in it.
Exactly.
Okay.
And it's that level of direct engagement
Right.
that can help you uncover those hidden needs and validate or invalidate your assumptions.
Got it.
Now, this ties into another core principle of the lean startup,
Okay.
the build, measure, learn feedback loop.
Okay, let's dive into that.
Yeah.
Because I think I saw that mentioned in one of the excerpts you sent.
Yeah, it's basically a rapid fire cycle.
Okay.
You build a minimum viable product or MVP,
Right.
measure its impact, learn from the data, and then iterate.
Okay, so the MVP is like that bare bones version of your product,
Exactly.
just enough to get it out there and start gathering feedback.
And it's important to remember that the MVP is not about sacrificing quality.
Right.
It's about strategically selecting which features or elements are essential for that initial learning cycle.
Got it.
It's about answering those key questions
Right.
as quickly and efficiently as possible.
This is where Ries gets super practical.
Oh, absolutely.
Because I remember reading about some really interesting examples
Yeah.
of how companies have used MVPs to test their assumptions.
He shares the example of Groupon.
Right.
Their very first product was a simple 2-for-1 pizza deal
Wow.
offered to a handful of people in their office building.
Right.
Hardly a tech marvel,
Yeah.
but it allowed them to test a core assumption.
Yeah.
Would people be interested in group discounts?
Right. And that simple test provided valuable data that helped them refine their model
Exactly.
and ultimately grow into the social commerce giant we know today.
Precisely. And that's the beauty of the MVP.
Yeah.
It allows you to validate or invalidate your assumptions with minimal resources
Right.
and avoid wasting time building something that nobody wants.
Totally. You mentioned other examples of MVPs that stood out to you.
I did.
I'm curious to hear what resonated with you.
Well, the Dropbox example really caught my eye.
They initially used an explainer video
Uh-huh.
to gauge interest before building their entire file syncing platform.
Right.
It just seems so brilliant.
It is.
Testing the core value proposition before investing a ton of time and resources into building the full product.
And then there's the food on the table example.
Okay.
Their initial MVP involved a team of chefs
Oh, wow.
manually creating personalized shopping lists and recipes
Yeah.
based on what's on sale at local stores.
Okay.
It's amazing how they used a high-touch concierge-style approach
Right.
to test their core concept
Yeah.
before building out the complex technology required for automation.
It's like they found a way to hack the system,
Yeah.
proving the value proposition
Right.
before investing in all the bells and whistles.
Totally.
And that shift in focus from building a perfect product
Yeah.
to rapidly testing assumptions
Yep.
is a real game changer for entrepreneurs.
It can save countless hours and resources
Right.
that might otherwise be wasted on developing something that nobody wants.
Yeah.
It's about embracing the iterative process,
Right.
constantly learning and adapting your approach based on real-world data.
Okay, this all makes so much sense.
Yeah.
But what happens when those core beliefs,
Yeah.
those leap of faith assumptions,
Right.
turn out to be wrong?
Well, that's where the concept of pivoting comes in.
Okay.
It's about making a significant change to your strategy
Uh-huh.
based on the validated learning you've gained.
So it's not about giving up.
Right.
It's about changing course when the data tells you to.
Exactly. Ries uses the story of his own startup IMVU to illustrate this point.
Oh, okay.
They initially believed that they were building an IM add-on
Right.
that would allow people to chat with their existing friends using avatars.
Oh, yeah, I remember reading about that.
Yeah.
It didn't quite go as planned, did it?
Right. They discovered that people actually wanted a standalone platform
Okay.
to make new friends, not just chat with their existing ones.
Got-
So it was a major shift in perspective.
And this was after they already had funding and some initial traction.
Yes. And it's a perfect example of why customer feedback is so crucial.
Right.
It's not just about asking people what they want,
Yeah.
but observing how they actually use your product.
Right.
And being willing to adapt
Yeah.
based on that real-world data.
So they ditched the add-on idea and pivoted to a standalone platform.
They did.
But even after the pivot, it wasn't exactly smooth sailing, was it?
True. They faced all sorts of challenges, from slow initial growth to failed experiments.
Right.
But they were constantly learning, iterating, and refining their product based on customer feedback.
Yeah, it's a great reminder that even after pivoting, the journey is rarely linear.
Right.
It's about embracing that iterative process and using data, not just intuition, to make those critical decisions.
Exactly.
And speaking of data-driven decisions, one of the most pivotal choices any startup faces is when to pivot and when to persevere.
Right.
How do you know when it's time to throw in the towel on your original vision versus doubling down and pushing through the challenges?
It's a great question, and it's something that every entrepreneur grapples with at some point.
Well, let's unpack that in our next segment.
Okay.
We'll dive deeper into the art of pivoting, explore the different engines of growth that can propel a startup forward, and even tackle the challenges of applying these lean startup principles within larger organizations.
Sounds good.
So stay tuned.
All right.
So before the break, we were talking about that make or break decision for startups, when to pivot and when to persevere.
Yeah, it can definitely be a tough one.
It seems like a real nail biter.
It is. There's no magic formula.
Right.
But Ries offers a framework that can help.
Okay.
Understanding your engine of growth.
Okay.
He outlines 3 primary types.
Right.
Sticky, viral, and paid.
Right. We touched on those earlier.
Yeah.
But could you walk us through each one?
Absolutely. So let's start with sticky growth. Okay. The focus here is on customer retention.
Okay.
How do you keep people coming back for more? Think subscription services, online games, anything that people use habitually.
So it's about creating a product that people love so much.
Yeah.
They just can't imagine life without it.
Exactly. A key metric for sticky growth is churn rate.
Oh.
The percentage of customers who ditch your product over a given period,
Right.
the lower the churn,
Right.
the stickier the product.
Got it.
It's like a bucket you're trying to fill with water.
Okay.
If it's too leaky, you'll never get ahead.
Makes sense.
Okay.
So how do you plug those leaks?
It's all about building a product that truly delights users.
Okay.
It needs to go beyond just meeting their basic needs.
Right.
It needs to exceed their expectations and provide ongoing value.
Mm-hmm.
Think about the features or services that keep you coming back to your favorite apps or platforms.
Yeah.
What keeps you hooked?
Okay, now I'm starting to think about my own habits.
Yeah.
And what keeps me engaged.
Right.
What about viral growth?
Yeah.
Seems like some companies just explode seemingly overnight.
You're thinking of companies like Facebook and Instagram, right?
Right.
They spread like wildfire.
Yeah.
With viral growth, each user brings in more users.
Right.
And those users bring in even more users. It's a chain reaction.
So it's like a snowball rolling downhill, picking up more snow with each rotation.
Yeah.
Until it becomes an avalanche of users.
That's a perfect analogy.
I like that one.
The key metric here is the viral coefficient.
Okay.
The number of new users each existing user brings in.
Right.
The higher the coefficient, the faster the growth.
Got it.
To leverage viral growth, you often bake sharing and inviting friends into the core user experience. Think referral programs, social media integration, or content that begs to be shared.
I get it. Make it so easy and rewarding to spread the word.
Yeah.
That users do the heavy lifting for you.
Exactly.
And what about paid growth?
This one's a bit more straightforward.
Yeah.
Paid growth uses advertising or other paid customer acquisition channels to drive expansion.
So you're essentially paying to get in front of potential customers.
You are.
Okay.
And companies leveraging paid growth are laser focused on optimizing their marketing campaigns.
Yeah.
They're targeting the right audience with the right message at the right time to get the most bang for their buck.
Right. So it's about finding a model where the cost of acquiring a new customer is lower than the revenue they generate.
Exactly. They're always refining and testing to maximize their return on investment.
It's fascinating how each engine has its own unique set of levers and metrics.
It is.
But how does this all tie back to the decision of pivoting versus persevering?
It provides a framework for evaluating whether your current strategy is actually moving you towards sustainable growth.
Right.
If you're pushing on the wrong levers, focusing on the wrong metrics, or your chosen engine just isn't firing, it might be a sign that you need to pivot.
So if your sticky engine is springing leaks faster than you can plug them, maybe it's time to consider a viral approach.
Exactly. Yeah. Or if you're pouring money into paid advertising, but not seeing a return, Maybe your messaging needs a revamp.
Right.
Or you're targeting the wrong audience.
You're barking up the wrong tree.
Yeah.
Research shared some examples of companies that successfully navigated this decision. Right.
He did. One example that stood out to me was Vodafone.
Okay.
They started with the mission of empowering voters to contact their elected officials.
Yeah.
But they went through multiple pivots.
Really?
Constantly refining their model based on data and customer feedback.
Okay.
It's a great example of how pivoting isn't about giving up.
Right.
It's about iteratively searching for a more viable path.
It's like that saying, the shortest distance between 2 points is not always a straight line.
Yeah.
Sometimes you need to zigzag a bit to get where you're going.
Exactly.
But they're also cautionary tales, right? There are companies that refused to pivot and ended up crashing and burning.
Unfortunately, yes. It's a reminder that ignoring the need to pivot when the data is screaming at you can be fatal.
Right.
Sometimes holding on to a vision that's not working is like clinging to a sinking ship.
And emotions can play a big role in that, can't they?
Absolutely.
It's hard to let go of an idea you've poured your heart and soul into.
Yeah. That's why Rise recommends having regular pivot or persevere meetings.
Okay.
Bringing together product development and business leadership to honestly assess the data and determine the best path forward.
Right. It's about taking emotions out of the equation and making data-driven decisions.
Exactly.
Okay, so we've explored how to choose the right engine of growth and how to know when it's time to pivot or persevere.
We have.
But how do you know when you've actually achieved that magical state of product market fit?
Right.
When you've built something that customers truly love, can't live without.
Ries has a somewhat cheeky answer to that question.
Okay.
If you have to ask, you probably have it.
Huh. So not exactly a scientific formula.
Not quite.
But surely there's some science to look out for, right?
Absolutely. It's that feeling of momentum.
Okay.
That sense that the product is selling itself.
Right.
Customers are spreading the word organically.
Yeah.
You're being pulled by the market.
Okay.
Rather than having to push relentlessly.
It's like catching a wave.
Yeah.
And riding it all the way to shore.
That's such a great analogy.
I like that one.
And achieving product market fit doesn't mean the work is done.
Right.
It's simply the starting point for building a truly sustainable and scalable business.
And that's where the principles of the lean startup become even more critical.
Exactly. It's about constantly iterating, learning, and adapting to ensure you're meeting evolving customer needs and staying ahead of the competition.
It's like you're never really done.
You're not.
Now, this brings us to another challenge that a lot of startups face as they grow.
Yeah.
Maintaining that early stage agility.
Right.
That willingness to experiment.
Yeah.
And adapt quickly.
Right. It's all too easy to fall into the trap of bureaucracy risk aversion and the dreaded, this is how we've always done it mentality.
Especially as a company grows and the stakes get higher.
Right.
There's a lot more to lose.
There is.
But isn't there a way to maintain that startup spirit?
There is.
Even as a company scales.
And that's where Ries introduces the concept of building an adaptive organization.
Okay.
A structure and culture that embrace continuous learning and rapid iteration even as the company grows. He emphasizes the importance of empowering teams to make decisions, breaking down silos, and fostering a culture of experimentation.
So it's about creating an environment where it's safe to fail, to try new things, and to learn from those experiments.
Precisely. And it requires a shift in mindset.
Okay.
Not just from the leadership team, but from everyone in the organization.
Yeah. It's about recognizing that the world is constantly changing, that customer needs are evolving, and that the only way to stay ahead is to constantly be learning and adapting.
Exactly.
I'm curious to learn more about how companies can actually create this culture of experimentation and adaptation.
Okay.
Are there specific techniques or tools they can use?
Oh, absolutely. And that's what we'll explore in the next segment. We'll delve into the practicalities of building an adaptive organization.
Great.
How to maintain that startup spirit even as a company scales, and how to create a culture where continuous learning and innovation are woven into the very fabric of the organization.
Okay, sounds good. I'm ready for part 3. So before we left off, we were talking about creating an adaptive organization.
Right.
A company that can keep that startup spirit alive, even as it scales.
It's a challenge, for sure.
Yeah, but how do you actually make that happen?
Right.
It sounds great in theory, but
Yeah.
isn't there a risk of it just becoming another empty buzzword?
There's always that risk. But Ries offers some really practical advice on how to avoid that trap.
Okay.
He emphasizes the importance of building systems and processes that support experimentation and continuous learning.
Right.
He even draws some interesting parallels to lean manufacturing.
Lean manufacturing. Yeah. That's about optimizing factories and assembly lines, right?
Right.
What does that have to do with building a tech company or any kind of startup?
Well, it's all about batch size.
Okay.
In manufacturing, smaller batches lead to faster feedback cycles and greater efficiency. It's the same in product development.
Wow.
Instead of those big, infrequent releases, he suggests releasing smaller updates more frequently.
Okay.
This allows for faster feedback cycles and reduces the risk of spending months building something nobody wants.
I'm starting to see the connection here. So it's about breaking down those big, complex projects into smaller, more manageable chunks, right?
Exactly. He even gives this great example of stuffing envelopes. It might seem counterintuitive, but completing each envelope one at a time, rather than doing all the folding, then all the stuffing, then all the sealing, actually leads to faster completion.
Because you're constantly getting feedback and adjusting your process as you go.
That's it. You eliminate all that wasted time and effort of sorting, stacking, and moving around those large piles of half-finished envelopes.
Right.
It's a simple but powerful illustration of how batch size can impact efficiency.
Okay.
And Ries connects it to the world of software development.
Right.
Imagine spending months developing a new feature,
right,
only to discover upon release that customers don't find it valuable.
Ouch. It's like cooking a 5-course meal, only to find out your guests are allergic to all the ingredients.
Right.
So smaller batches, faster feedback, and less risk of a major flop.
Exactly.
What other insights does he offer on building an adaptive organization?
Well, he highlights IMVU's approach.
Okay.
They were making small, incremental changes to their product multiple times per day.
Really?
Constantly testing and iterating based on customer data.
Wow.
It's a fascinating example of how embracing smaller batch sizes can unlock incredible agility and speed in product development.
Right.
And this approach isn't limited to software.
Okay.
Ries challenges traditional manufacturing processes too, highlighting emerging technologies like 3D printing and rapid prototyping that enable companies to experiment and iterate much more quickly.
So it's not just about changing the way you develop software. Right. It's about changing your whole mindset.
Exactly.
A willingness to experiment and learn from those experiments.
It's about acknowledging that we don't have all the answers up front.
Right.
That we need to be constantly testing our assumptions and adjusting our course based on what we learn.
Now, one of the key benefits of this iterative approach, working in smaller batches, is the ability to identify and address problems more quickly.
Cool.
Okay, I can see how that would be crucial, especially in a fast-paced startup environment.
Yeah.
But how do you actually create a culture where people feel comfortable surfacing problems early on?
Right.
Isn't there a natural tendency to want to sweep things under the rug and hope they'll just go away?
That's where Ries introduces this fantastic concept from Toyota.
Okay.
The andon cord.
The what now?
The andon cord.
Okay.
It's a cord that any worker on the assembly line can pull if they spot a defect.
Uh-huh.
It actually stops the entire production line.
Whoa. That sounds pretty drastic.
It can be.
Wouldn't that cause delays and disruptions?
It can.
Yeah.
But Toyota realized that the cost of letting defects slip through is far greater in the long run.
Oh, I see.
It's about catching problems early before they snowball into bigger issues.
So it's a bit like that saying, a stitch in time saves 9.
Exactly. And Ries argues that this principle applies equally to product development. He talks about building a culture where people feel empowered to speak up when they see a problem, rather than trying to hide it or pass the buck.
I'm seeing a theme here. It's all about embracing transparency and feedback, right?
You got it.
Not just from customers, but from everyone within the organization.
It's about creating a culture of continuous learning and improvement.
Right. Now, remember that concept of validated learning we talked about earlier? Ries introduces a powerful tool to support that. The 5 whys.
Not the 5 whys.
I remember that from the excerpts you sent over.
Yep.
It seemed like a pretty simple idea.
Yeah.
But I had a feeling there was more to it than meets the eye.
It's deceptively simple.
Okay.
It's about asking why repeatedly until you uncover the underlying systemic issue that needs to be addressed.
Right.
He shares this example of a server failure at IMVU.
Okay.
At first, it seems like a simple technical glitch.
Right.
But by asking why 5 times, they discovered that the root cause was a lack of training for new engineers. which stemmed from a manager who didn't prioritize training because they felt too busy.
Wow, so it's like peeling back the layers of an onion to get to the core of the problem.
That's a great analogy.
And what's so insightful about this approach is that it moves beyond simply assigning blame.
Right.
It's about understanding the system that created the problem in the first place.
Right.
So you can fix the system, not just the symptom.
Exactly.
And I remember Ries contrasting the 5 whys with what he called the 5 blames.
Yeah, that's the easy route.
Right.
It's so easy to fall into that trap of pointing fingers and assigning blame.
Right. It's much harder to have the humility to ask why.
Yeah.
And really try to understand the root cause of a problem.
And it's so much more effective.
So the 5 whys is a tool for building a more constructive and collaborative approach to problem solving.
Absolutely. And it's not just for startups.
Right.
It can be applied to any organization or even to our personal lives.
It's a great life lesson.
It's about shifting from a culture of blame to a culture of curiosity and continuous improvement.
That's a great place to end it.
Yeah.
This has been such an insightful deep dive.
It has.
I feel like I have a much deeper understanding of the lean startup method now.
Good. I'm glad.
But I'm curious, as we wrap things up, what for you is the most impactful takeaway from all of this?
For me, it's the power of embracing a growth mindset.
Okay.
You know, that belief that we can learn and improve through experimentation, feedback, and iteration, that we don't have to have all the answers up front.
What?
That failure is not the opposite of success. Right. It's a stepping stone on the path to success.
So good.
And that the most successful individuals and organizations are those that are constantly learning, iterating, and adapting to new information.
It's about embracing that journey of discovery.
Yeah.
Recognizing that the learning never really ends.
Never.
And that's a message that resonates far beyond the world of startup, doesn't it?
Absolutely. Whether you're launching a company, leading a team, or just trying to navigate the complexities of life, the principles of the Lean Startup offer a powerful framework for navigating uncertainty, embracing change, and creating something truly remarkable.
Well, there you have it.
There you go.
A deep dive into the Lean Startup method. I hope this has given you a solid understanding of this incredible framework.
I hope so.
And how you can apply it to your own endeavors.
Yeah, and remember, the journey of learning and innovation never truly ends.
Right.
Embrace that continuous cycle of experimentation, feedback, and adaptation.
Yeah.
Always striving to create something better and make a positive impact on the world.
Well said. Go forth and experiment.
Yes.
Test your assumptions, build your MVPs, and never stop learning. You never know what amazing things you might create.
That's right.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive.
It was a pleasure.